Hello, everyone, and welcome to this fireside chat where we're talking about the skills and industry first, building the skills and marketplaces for growth in Africa. My name is Olayinka David West. I'm the Professor of Information Systems and Associate Dean at Lagos Business School. And one of the things that has been driving my career over the last 30 years is the drive for digital transformation, but not just for the sake of it, but for societal and business development. And today we've seen that in the world we live in today, we've seen digital transformation catalyze a lot of things. We see that talent is one of the things that's needed. And in the FinTech ecosystem, we've also seen the influx of venture capital funds and the growth of the ecosystem in general. But one of the things that's lacking in the ecosystem is still this dearth of talent. And everywhere I go, everyone I speak to, every CEO, every startup is looking for talent. So today's conversation is really topical and apt in the midst of this FinTech conference. And so what we're going to be talking about today is building the skills of the marketplace for growth. And my discussant this afternoon is Amadou Daffe. He's the CEO and founder of Gebeya. And in the course of our conversations, Amadou will introduce himself on what Gebeya is doing, because Gebeya is providing a talent marketplace for African talent development and growth in general. So let's just get into the conversations and get started. So Amadou, just let's start and ask ourselves, why is this topic interesting? Why should we care? And let's set the context around what's going on in Africa. So can you share some thoughts with us, please?
Yeah, definitely. So as for every ecosystem that's relevant into, the way we want to look at the continent, whether it's in FinTech, EdTech, e-commerce, what have you, there's three components. You have the components of the entrepreneurs, the startups. I don't think we have any problem of convincing young Africans now to start their own company. We've seen everything, maybe close to 100,000 startups across the continent in different countries, different sectors. That's the first angle. That's going to keep on growing. I believe it's going to grow exponentially. The second part of the ecosystem is the capital investment, right? We've seen, like you said, investment is probably now tripling every year. I believe that we're at $6 billion invested this year alone. So that's going to continue to grow. But what we tend to sort of forget is, well, who are going to build those companies, right? Who are those talents? The entrepreneur himself or herself is a talent, but you also have the people who support them, the co-founders, the engineers, so on and so forth. We're not paying attention to that because that's not growing exponentially, at least from the expertise and skill set or even seniority that we need to go in parallel with this growth in startup being created, but also capital being invested. So this is why it's very important to see what would the talent ecosystem look like in the next 5 years in Africa in order to support this growth.
Okay, great. So we have our three recipes for the ecosystem, or three ingredients for the ecosystem. We have the startups themselves, we have capital and talent. So let's start with some of the constraints and let's just sort of explore some of the constraints that we see. What's stopping us from building the talent for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years?
It's a legacy of a vision from leaders of the specific countries, right? Digital, like you said, transformation is still new in the minds of the leaders in Africa. If I want to show a parallel where when India 30, 40 years ago made a strong statement to the world that they were going to produce as many engineers as possible and fuel some of the economies such as the US, right? Without India, I doubt Silicon Valley or some of these companies would be where they are today, for the simple fact that even the CEO of Google and Microsoft were both Indian. So they had the vision to build out when it was necessary to something, the foresight. We haven't had the foresight because of sort of inheritance of an educational system that was more of knowledge, general knowledge, rather than being practical about it. And you see from both countries that speak French in Africa, countries that speak English in Africa, and sometimes the French-speaking Africans will say, well, Anglophones are more practical, just because there was some sense of, maybe foresight that we haven't seen. So that's the legacy. The legacy of not having the foresight is coming to bite us, right? The other thing now that comes to play is, okay, we're here now. What needs to be done now and how much time we have to get it done? We don't have 20 years to build the talent pool that we need for this continent. If every 3 months there's a unicorn that's announced in Africa, right? We have possibly 2 to 5 years to really cope up. Otherwise, the consequences would be these companies that raise money would end up hiring people from Eastern Europe, which is very common now, Asia, and so on and so forth. And we're just going to add on to the actual sort of pain that we feel with all of this youth we have in Africa, all these young people who are sort of struggling to get opportunities to strive. So those are the two components that I see.
Okay, so Amadou, you've mentioned the opportunities. So we have the young people, but we also have the dragging factor where we don't have the foresight and we haven't defined the vision for the youth in that sense. We have legacy education systems that are yet to take us into that new world we live in. Now, one of the things that I was reading today is the fact that the IMF released a report in 2019 about the talent gap. And one of the things they said is that they sort of gave us a sizing of that global talent gap, which is about 85 million tech skills required globally. But what was interesting was the fact that some countries or some cities are now taking strategic positions and offering incentives for tech talent to come into their country. And I think we saw things like that in Lithuania and things. So it's not just about creating the pool of talent, but also attracting companies to set up in our spaces. Why are we not seeing this kinds of movements across our government and across our cities there? Why are we not seeing them?
Lack of vision again. And to add to that, lack of information, right? Instead of having these meetings they have at the AU, talk about all kinds of different, issues that's more in the present. I don't think they talk about enough of the issue that needs to be in the future, because if you did, then you'll have these entrepreneurs like us, some of those guys who raise a lot of money, and come and inform them, hey, we need talent. We just raised $200 million. This is what we need. Which country would be able to address that? Which country is willing to take on a chance and say, let me build a talent pool for this. One country in particular that's quite interesting, though, that has a vision is Rwanda. Right? Paul Kagame pretty much has this vision about Rwanda being the next Singapore, to the point where he even convinced Carnegie Mellon to actually have a university at the same level as it is in the US in Kigali. So there's a few of these sort of leaders who think that way. But I think now it's time that the ecosystem comes together. I think the stakeholders, some of these big companies. You remember when I think it was the Trump administration in the US was banning visas or something like that for foreigners, immigrants, and all the big guys came together and say, no, we need these foreigners to come and help us build the things. So I think they should be the same. We should have these big unicorns come together and talk to the African government and say, hey, we need to build a talent pool. We're willing to put money at it, because you also have to invest. I think that's part of the solution, rather than just giving you the challenge, which is they're not informed. They don't know what's going on.
Okay, great. And I think what you're saying is we need to bring more diversity into these multilateral conversations. We need to think about the future. Yes, we have our own challenges that our leaders are looking at, but we can't also stay in the present moment. We need to start thinking in an expansionary manner, in a transformational manner, about what the future is going to look like. So that's fine. But I think for our audience as well, we talk about talent, we talk about skills, and we talk about all these things, but I think can we break it down? What exactly are we talking about? Because in some discussions, people are talking about building STEM. You're talking about building engineers. So what do we mean when we talk about digital talent and digital skills?
Right. So I wouldn't even say digital talent. I would just say digital skills that a talent must have. So a talent is someone that can come to any company, whether it's a public or a private, and create or add value that can transform potentially, it's not like you're just an employee. What do you have that's so valuable that when I bring you into my company, at least that's how I see it, right? You can help me transform and achieve the vision that I have. And I'm gonna take any typical startup. You have different categories of talents. People, when they think of talent or digital, they only think coders. Like now, coders don't necessarily build a company. Right? You have the digital marketing experts. You have your CFO must be a talent, your chief marketing officer. There's different kind of other positions, right, that are important to help build a startup, a company, right? So you have to look at it now. When they say STEM, because the most popular sort of skill to have in this day and age is coding, right? Everywhere you go, people are looking for developer, different tech stack. Understand, but that's cheating, right? You can have all the coders in the world. India has all the coders in the world, but there's still a lot of things that can be done. So you have to bring in that sort of new, so different types of talent, like a good accountant can help you raise money or make you fail or not raise money, do some of those things. So that's how I see talent, not necessarily from the STEM and coding perspective, someone who can add value to the company, who can add a transformative value to the company once you hire them.
Okay, great. So it's really about looking at the entire value delivery system of the organization and ensuring that you have those who are going to transform those systems. But from the business school perspective, some of the things that we always look at are really two issues: problem solving and critical thinking, as well as what we call human skills or soft skills. How well do they, what is the role of these in this fintech space and in the talent gap that we're trying to close?
Biggest skill set that someone has to have these days is soft skills. Soft skills around, especially emotional intelligence, because you have to adapt to a culture of a company. People have to trust you that you're self-sufficient, and COVID sort of accelerated that, right? Before you could see your employee, but now you don't see it. You don't know, how they manage their state of mind. Are they healthy? There's so many things that can go in there. That's a new skill set to develop. As a matter of fact, most of these big companies, I don't know if you saw that press release about a year ago, Apple, I think Google said they don't need people with degrees anymore. Doesn't matter, you know what I mean? They need people with certain types of skill set, right? Part of it is emotional, soft skills. Of course, you have to have an expertise in something, but the rest of it is more important because they want you to be part of this culture and this mindset of being transformative in whatever you do. So that's really what it is there. It's more of the importance. Whenever I'm talking to a talent that we're about to place, or even someone I hire, is always, can they fit the culture? Do they have, how would they react if in certain situation emotionally? Would they pick up and leave, right? People are complaining that the turnover of talents is very sort of quick now. Young people, especially millennials, 2 years they're out. They don't stay longer than 2 years because they only experience. Are they bored? So you can pick up those things even before you hire them, so you know how to retain them, right? So that's called soft skills is really what most of the conversation should be around. Because you can get coding lessons somewhere, be a great coder, but if you don't have, if you're abrasive, how do you fit into a culture where everybody's so, cool about being who they are and all that stuff?
So in addition to the technical skills, we also need to be mindful of our values and belief systems and those soft skills that we need that bring the personality and the humanity into the workplace as well. So we're not robots in that sense. Fantastic. So we've sort of developed a set of skills. We understand what we need to do. We understand where the gaps are. So Amadou, let's talk about solutions. And from the solutions, I want to draw from what you're doing at Gebeya, for example. So when we talk about how do we leverage talent and how do we use technology as an accelerator for talent in general?
Right, so technology is always an acceleration, right? It's an equalizer. Things move faster when you use technology. Now, there's two ways that talents can be used. You can use talent in a sense where you have a specific purpose, specific product that needs to be built in a very short period of time, where you get an exceptional talent to come in for a short period of time. That's one way to do it. And the other one is to have core talent, meaning people who are your soldiers, right? Your diehard, people who are around you and stuff to help you build, or will be there forever, right? And then if you have the combination, so what's been going on in the past, this is changing, right? It was more of always having a core team. People love to have 10,000 employees, benefits and all that type of stuff. But that's going away, especially you have this distributed team now and remote work. People are saying, okay, if I'm going to hire a graphic designer, why do I need to pay him 9 to 5 for a full year? If I need him to do a set amount of work for 2 months, then I can release him back to the market so they can take a vacation or they can go and work for somebody else. And you don't have that burden of retention. The burden of retention is a nightmare for HR people, right? They're always trying to figure out how do we retain this talent. But the core team is essentially how you leverage it. Now, the other thing is, how do you build the talent gap in Africa right now, which is really what keeps me awake? There's a very small percentage of talent in the seniority expertise that we need in Africa. just because of the work experience, or they haven't touched the technology that the world is talking about. To the point like companies like Andela, gave up on that and, fired most of the junior guys that wanted to focus on just senior. They actually have to go move to South America to find if they can find senior there. So that's a big gap between the raw talent we have. We have a lot of talent. We say we have a lot of young people, but the seniority that allows you to actually build those products or build transformative companies is lacking. And how do we now, in a short period of time again, take this raw talent and take it to the next step of being intermediate and seniors? That's the kicker. If any company out there figures that out, you'll pretty much save the continent, at least from the entrepreneur side of the. Like, it's very hard to find a senior person on the continent without leveraging the diaspora or somebody from Eastern Europe or so.
Okay, so basically we're looking at the core team. We're looking at different ways of contracting, which is really also managing the overheads and the cost of the organization. And I think what I heard you say was more like a timeshare for employees kind of thing, especially different talents that you don't need full-time, exploiting and working better with global virtual teams and things like that. But one thing I want to look at is, again, for me, coming from a business school, and I think this is where, when we're talking about intermediate and senior level talent, what are the things we need to be doing to collaborate? Because I don't think, again, there's no magic bullet solution to this. There's no single source provider. So how are you doing this at Gebeya? What should we be doing from the formal education perspective, industry perspective, degree perspective? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm actually writing an article that's going to come out soon about specifically that. So this is an ecosystem effort. So the government's going to do its part from the educational perspective, but we need it informal, like I said earlier. So there's no brain on that. On the startup and entrepreneur side, let's give the young people who just graduated college or are juniors a chance to learn. So it's our responsibility to take these young people, give them, internship, what have you, whether we keep it or not, because we can put them back on a pool, somebody else can use them. So we have to take that responsibility as entrepreneurs to do that. So we hire a lot of interns, rotate it into our departments, or put them into our marketplace, give them some projects that they can work on so they can get to a next level, right? The other thing is now the educational system. I always say this. Most of the African countries inherited colonial education system, which is sort of pretty much behind, right? Like I say, general knowledge. It's not gonna work to develop a country, right? What we need to do is revamp the educational system, make it practical. Let's make a sacrifice of 20 years of just being practical in our education system. We can always go back and learn the history of Nigeria and what happened in 1944. As a matter of fact, you don't even need to learn that. Google it and you get the answer. Right? You don't need to memorize. You don't need to memorize these dates, these events. They're all out there. So take a sacrifice of 20, 30 years and just churning people who are practically trained with an entrepreneur mindset, being able to be functional in a gig economy, specialize in specific skills. Like if you're a data scientist, just learn math. Don't need history. You can learn history in the pastime. You may say that you may water down the person's knowledge gap, but who cares? Google knows everything. So that's what I would sort of advocate, that which is very drastic. I don't think a government would just make that sort of mandate, but I think it could work because we need to catch up, right? We're 500 years behind in terms of a lot of things with the rest of the world. We need to make that sacrifice of a generation to just sacrifice to be practical. I think it happened in Nigeria. Somebody was telling me that most of the bankers back in the day, they hire a bunch of engineers and they were coming in from telecommunication stuff and maybe strengthen the banking system in Nigeria. So everybody was learning the same thing, engineering. And then they shifted later to doctors and as this population sort of grew. It's pretty much drastic, but that's my opinion on that.
Okay, so you believe that we need to take an aggressive approach to solving this problem. And when you talk about practice-based, I'll share with you, when we at the Lagos Business School, we teach with a case study method. And when we get some young MBAs in and we give them a case study and they talk about they wear the shoes of the protagonist, and we say, what would you do? And honestly speaking, then they're shocked, Amadou, because they don't know that what their opinion is. They're waiting for the lecturer to come and tell them. So we said that, no, we're not facilitators. We're facilitating a discussion. and we want every idea is a good idea and things. So how do we change that thinking? Because it is a thinking that has been imbibed in us and has been normalized in us. How do we start to change that thinking so people can think freely and have open minds?
It's going to be very tough. That's the greatest challenge ever. So the good news is we're learning, that's what it is, right? Learning to be competitive. Okay. The good news is Africa is learning, at least in some industry, how to be competitive. I'm gonna take the entertainment industry. I'm looking at movies like how Nollywood took over the entire Africa. In Ethiopia, every Ethiopian watching it. So people figure out a way to carve a way to sort of do their things without worrying about, necessarily the status quo, right? I'll take another one in music, right? Afrobeats, right? Took over the continent, and then you have Mapiano that took over. So it is possible. The question is, who's going to trigger that interest of saying, let's not think of the teacher like a god, right? Let's think of it as someone who I can learn from. Sorry, one of my things from I can learn from, but be practical about it. Again, is what the teacher's telling me affect directly my pocket or my social life and saying so that's a philosophical problem pretty much to have. And maybe you have an idea on how to do it because you're the professor here. I'm just an entrepreneur.
I think, again, the thing about this is that they have to scale. You can't expect, like you said, an ecosystem approach. How do we ensure that we're all doing the same things, whether it's through mentorship, apprenticeship, internships? We have practice-based learning and opportunities in that sense. So I think it's really, as they say in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child. And we need that village approach in this kind of problem. One thing I want to ask about, Amadou, is the issue of women. And there's still a dearth of women in the tech space. What do we need to do to also drive more women participation? Because when you talk about the value system and the whole value delivery system, I know that research has shown that when you have women in your organizations and in senior leadership, they're better run companies. So how do we also drive that even from the gender perspective?
Yeah, so for example, at Gebeya, I think 60 or 70% of the team are women, right? We made a drastic, and even always say that my next CEO, once I step down, will be a woman. It's just no brainer because of the talent. I'm in the talent business, right? It's different kinds of way of thinking that you need to have, right? I can't just be, have this dogmatic way of thinking as a man. But so the thing that can save that perception about women in this sort of digital transformation, I think, is around the gig economy. With the gig economy, the concept of remote work, going to an interview doesn't require, the woman to sort of behave a certain way because a man is interviewing from a sexist perspective, right? That I know because we interview a lot of talent and stuff. They're very comfortable not even seeing you in a sense. So, and then the man doesn't have a perception of something else, right? How you look, how you behave, and all that stuff. I think the gig economy has presented a lot of opportunity for women who were behind, who are working, those things that were not visible. Now they're out there, right? And you can see that even when you browse LinkedIn, you see, they have a channel, but do we have a platform? And I think the platform is these gig platforms like Gebeya, Andeles, Upwork, and so on and so forth. I'll be curious to see how many women, and I'll give you that answer in the email, are actually in those gig platforms. That'll be interesting to see. And we can see the trend. And when did that start? And did it accelerate? And what accelerated? And I bet remote work is the one that accelerated at least the past 2 years. I'll do the research great. And send it over your way.
Please, thank you. That would be interesting because I think that the platforms are there to help. But one thing I heard in talking some platform work I'm doing is that the women sometimes are doing the lower paid work. So you find out that they have to do more jobs to get the same amount of money, while some of the men who are in the more technical spaces might do 2 or 3 jobs and even just clean up what the woman has done in 30 jobs. So that's also the mix of work is also important to look at when you're looking at that data. But thank you, Amadou. So we've looked, so there's different ways to skin the cat in general. We need to think about the education system. We need to think about the blended, the formal training. So tell us, how is Gebeya solving these in general? Now let's just focus on Gebeya now.
Right. So Gebeya's main vision was just to be globally competitive by providing talents that can compete on the continent because it's Pan-African by nature and eventually expand to the rest of the world. So what we've done is we started off with saying, okay, we're going to go to a country where nobody talks about. I could have started this company in Nigeria, Kenya. Let me go to Ethiopia, where second largest population, educational system little behind in other African countries, huge young population who wants to succeed. And when we came here, we had the dearth, right, of talent. You have a raw talent, but with no work experience. So we built out a training program that's similar to what you guys are doing in business school, very practical, right? We plug them into companies, we give them projects, they work on it, and they come out. When they came out, we realized, okay, they have special skills that even Nigerian companies are hiring them. And one of the reasons why the Nigerian companies hire them, because the mindset of these engineers we train in Ethiopia, but also the cost. Because what we've seen the past 3-4 years, cost of talent has sort of been sort of all over the place in Nigeria because of a couple of things. Andela came, boost up the egos, the guys, the engineers, they make more money now, they left the country and so on and so forth. So there's one place, at least the Nigerian company. So Ethiopia can be a country where we can do so. So with that, we started onboarding a lot of talent using a very sort of interesting vetting process where it's a peer-to-peer review. So if you're a talent, you're trying to join our platform and I'm in your same skill set, you'll interview me, you give me all that. So a few things that we're being very creative about. The only challenge I have is I'm not moving fast enough for two reasons. Number one, I'm underfunded if you compare the rest of the guys, because the concept of Ethiopia and how I went about it. Number two is the lack of the seniority, that gap I was mentioning, right? And, somebody has to solve it. I can't, and then from a business standpoint, I'm chasing two things, right? This chicken and egg. How fast can I get talent? How fast can I get them to be matched with clients? So I need to invest in one of them, focus on one of them, then pivot back and stuff like that. But Gebeya would be the platform, I believe, in the next few years to be the center of attention for talent, right, in the continent, and diversify, meaning you can be anywhere in Africa and hire talent anywhere in Africa. Eventually, after these 3 years, I think it'll be a global platform where now, Europe is always poaching guys from Africans anyway. They don't need to do that anymore. The Africans can stay in place, and European companies and so on and so can hire them. So that's our contribution to the continent.
Great. And how successful have you been so far in terms of numbers?
Well, I would say people would say successful, hence why I'm in this talk, right? That's why I'm being invited, but I am not close to, looking to build $1 billion value company in the next 3 years. When I get there, then I'll tell you, because it's the challenge. I love the challenge, changing lives, we're making money. Things are going well, but we're not even close. And I think we have another 3 years to really, really, stand out, like on where we want it to be.
So you're in the stage of building muscle now, and I think if anything goes by the news of Angela's raise a couple of weeks ago, I think you're on the right track, right? Can we say that?
Exactly, I'm on the right track. Definitely on the right.
You're on the right.
I'm not.
And
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's fine.
And one thing you mentioned that I just want to point out is you talked about Ethiopia, being in Ethiopia and the fund flows in. Can you expand on that? Because I think that has an enabling environment conversation that goes back to what you said about government. So it's not just about the education system, but what else can you add to that?
So Ethiopia has a different sense of urgency than any other African countries because of size of population, some of the political issues. So youth has to have jobs. So anybody who comes with anything that allow people to be trained, to be skilled, and all that stuff would sort of win. Safaricom, one of the big telco companies in Kenya, just bought a license in Ethiopia for $1 billion. The government loved it because they know they're going to create thousands of jobs, better the network system, and so on and so forth. So it's an environment where it's a nation in building. So it's exciting, right? Yeah.
Okay. So we need to take this excitement across the continent, and we need to ensure that we can build the talent and we can enhance the livelihoods of all the Africans. Ladies and gentlemen, Amadou, thank you. You've been a great discussant, and I'll look forward to catching up with you in the future to see how you've gone. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Inka. Thank you, everybody.
I think our time